I worked for 8 years at the Post Office Research Station at Dollis Hill, and very happy times. But since Derek worked there also, I deliberately left on marriage and joined a computer company. And again, had a wonderful time, did my first management job there. But soon came across a variant of the glass ceiling. I was blocked in what was an excellent company with massive opportunities and in which I had achieved and done a lot of new things in the computing industry. Blocked because I was a woman. And really overnight, I realized that I was not going to get any further and that I needed to make my own way. And I gave notice. I was only on a month's notice, but I gave 3 months' notice because I'm very professional. I had big jobs to sort of actually finish up before I left. And basically started my own company. It could not have started smaller. I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't even know the difference between a company or a partnership or so. It was absolutely an amateur start. I put in £6, worth about £100 in today's terms, but I had a little portable typewriter. I spent that money on making a letterhead. And then I sat back in our small cottage, our first family home, and hoped that work would come in. And it didn't. So I waited a bit more, and eventually I learned that hard lesson is that you have to go out and get work, and that building an organisation is as much about selling as it is about producing the goods or services that you're offering. Being a bit of an academic, I really tried hard to find out what I was doing, but all the books in the library about business and starting businesses were about material production lines, the sort of ratios that you have there and what you've got to do with purchasing and so on. And so I was talking about not only a service organisations selling computer software, which at that time was given away free with the hardware, so I was the laughingstock of the industry, but aiming to do so in a way that was, to me, socially necessary, because I had been blocked in my job, in my employment. I wanted to offer employment or paid work or consultancy, call it. Well, I'm trying to think, what did I call it in the early days? I started talking about jobs. Jobs for women with children. And there were a lot of women in the computing industry in those days, and they were leaving immediately on marriage or when their first child was expected. So there was an enormous wastage of software skills there. I wanted to do certain things. I wanted to write certain types of software. And as a mathematician, it was scientific software that I wanted to do. I found it absolutely fascinating, very, very engrossing, and I had a certain skill in it. But I soon found that the market was not in scientific work at all. The market was in so-called data processing, and this was handling vast files, which were tape files in those days, and which frankly I found boring. There was a certain intrinsic interest in the size of the files, but I did find it boring. But I found a happy compromise in operations research, where the sort of marriage between scientific approach and commercial interest and impact married. And so I did a lot of work in the operations research, something called program evaluation review techniques, logistics, and we did things like one of our earliest contracts was for British Rail. It's the first time I ever travelled British Rail first class, because they gave me a warrant to get me up to Doncaster, which I think was their headquarters at the time. And so we scheduled goods trains for British Rail. We scheduled buses in Wallasey. We scheduled deliveries for Tate and Lyle sugar vans, and these things that took big bits of treacle. And I remember when we went to that client, they offered us £6 it would have been, things of treacle, sort of struggling home with it on the train. That emphasis on logistics took some time, and you can still see elements of it today. It wasn't easy starting a business, because I was on my own and envied other companies that had 2 or 3 people. You know, ideally, I wish I'd got somebody on marketing, somebody on finance, somebody on the technical side, whereas I really was a technician and had to learn how to do the marketing and had to learn how to look after the finances. I remember being in tears when an inland revenue claim came in and asked for more money than I'd made in the last year or something, and just burst into tears. I had no idea how to cope with these situations at all. So what started as a way of allowing me to work as in the way that I wanted, on the things that I was interested in, developed very quickly into a little group of women with children or domestic responsibilities. We moved from talking about jobs to talking about careers. We started doing training. We fairly sort of risky stuff, I suppose, because in those days, if there was a difficulty, I could still technically salvage it myself. And that happened once or twice where projects ran late and I had to drop everything else and go and salvage it, and nearly knock myself up in the process.